Imagine a place where the boundaries of age, industry, background, and culture melt away, replaced by a shared desire to explore the depths of our collective experiences. Here, on the open, shaded porch, amidst an atmosphere of serenity and tranquility, leaders from all walks of life gather to share their stories, the stories that shape their very beings and doings. This is the Knowledge Mindfulness Porch with Laila Maroof.
So this week I have the pleasure of speaking with Seham AlHusaini. Seham is a leader, a visionary, and a trailblazer in the fields of food delivery, logistics, and banking. She's here to share with us her insights, challenges, and achievements as the General Manager of Deliveroo in Kuwait, one of the most competitive and dynamic markets in the region. Seham, I'm so excited to learn from you today.
I hope so. I'm honored and flattered. I hope I can meet the expectation. It's a pleasure.
You know something? Really, I was looking at the date, August 2nd. Oh my God. So August 2nd, 1990, go back 32 years ago. I mean, for me, every year, August 2nd just brings so many video clips in my mind. It's such a vivid memory. I remember the details of every single moment that day. What does August 2nd mean to you, Seham?
Oh, that's, I was about 3 years old. Two things come to mind. One is probably my earliest memories ever are during the war, and I have vivid memories at a very young age. When I think of August 2nd, I think about it as my parents and their resilience because we were very young, and obviously it was such a difficult period of time. It was only 7 months, but it was just so jarring. And I think about how resilient my parents were, how they dealt with the situation, having kind of two toddlers essentially, and really the threat of war, the threat of like your life being in danger, and how they did that, and kind of my memory. Yeah, it's crazy. I haven't thought about that in a long time.
I think that thread, really, I just feel with it so much that I feel sometimes, especially when the COVID hit, I just recalled some of those feelings I had during the invasion of Kuwait. That was August 2nd, 1990. And it just brought all these emotions back. But also it made me think, what are the lessons learned from those days? Disruptions like that, like the invasion of Kuwait, like COVID-19. I don't know, but it just feels like it's becoming like, I don't want to say it's going to become the norm, but we're seeing a fast-changing world right now. And I was looking at your background, Seham, Columbia University, MBA, Austin, Texas, your undergrad in engineering. How do you think those programs have helped you in preparing, let's say, even personally? Let's start personally. How do you think those programs has helped you to prepare for challenging times, uncertainty, unpredictability? Have they helped you?
Definitely. I think even before thinking about the programs, it's the context of, I've studied in a place like Austin. Austin is like 7,000 miles away from home for me. So just kind of leaving your comfort zone to go so far away and be part of an amazing world-class program at UT Austin, which I loved. I think just that kind of shift and change and discomfort in a way, being kind of out of your comfort zone, I think is really a huge influence on kind of my ability to be prepared for change, for adversity. I remember the very few first kind of weeks and days of my freshman year when I was all alone, and that feeling of being very alone, that feeling there's no one there. Your parents say goodbye, they get on a plane, they're going very, very far away, and you're not in the same time zone, and you can't pick up the phone and just call. I think that feeling, it's still now, when I talk about it, I can go right back and feel that feeling of loneliness and fear and uncertainty. So I think just going abroad and facing that reality and being on your own just gives you a bit of mental toughness that you think you're not going to overcome. And then every day, every week, you get stronger and you learn. So I think there's that element. I think, at UT or even at Columbia, I think the programs and the people you meet and what you learn by just being surrounded by such a diverse group of people, in a way, prepares you through their experiences for uncertainty. I mean, you meet people who've been from all different types of the world, who've had such different experiences. And I think the proximity to people who are so different to you somehow kind of ingrained some learning and some experience by proximity that I think at both, maybe at UT and even at Columbia and in general being in New York, I think gave me that sense of preparation. The experience you get in any university program, in my experience, like, of course, it's about the professors, the lectures, the courses, but a lot of it, I think, maybe 70, 80%, if I want to put a number, because I'm a very data-driven person, is the people that you're around and your peers and what they've done and how you learn from them, and, a learning group or a team. And I think that their experiences become start to have some impact on you and your understanding of the world. So I've always found my peers to be the most phenomenal part of those journeys and the biggest learning for me.
Do you keep in touch with those people?
I do. I mean, not as well as I should. I think distance is really hard. Distance and time zones and in Europe, and now being it's made it harder than I've imagined. And I have friends who are all over the world. I think social media has made it much easier. You can see what people are doing and you feel like you have that bit of closeness, which is why I have so many good things to say about social media, even though it's coming under a lot of heat. So that keeps you close. And of course, whenever I'm over in Europe or haven't been to the US in a while, I do see people. And the thing is, you don't stay as in touch. But then the moment you get in a room with someone who you've kind of been in the trenches with them, you've done a late night, study cram, or it's a reminder for me to do better to maintain some of those relationships.
Yeah, social networking is an amazing, amazing, amazing tool to keep, our knowledge fresh. All these connections that you have all over the world, definitely, it's a treasure in so many ways. But going back to those programs, I'm very curious, Seham, if you were to design a program for leadership development, what ingredient would you put there that you haven't seen so far in any of those programs that you have studied in?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the thing I've learned, or the biggest challenge, I feel, as you get more senior and as you kind of become a more seasoned leader, you realize that dealing with people and being able to coach people and get the best out of them, and it's not about you anymore, is so critical in your ability to succeed. We read a lot about leaders and strategy, in business school in particular. It's very case-based. And you do, this case about this finance strategy you have to come up with, and this case about how you overcome this competitive landscape. And we don't talk so much about, well, how do you deal with people? Almost like some kind of behavioral, or almost like you have to become a therapist sometimes, because you are managing a group of individuals who you need to get the best out of them to be successful. And I think the more senior you are in the organization, the more, your success is dependent on the success of your leaders and your managers and the people who are working for you. So I think that's something I would have loved. I would have definitely taken a course that was managing human behavior, even though probably at the time I wouldn't have realized how important it is. But yeah, I think people management and getting the best out of people and is something that's missing. And I think MBAs are really I don't want to say it's a narcissistic degree, but people who get MBAs, it's all about you. I'm the business leader, I'm the strategist, I'm the one.
It's all about the I.
It's very, it's true. Maybe it's a stereotype, but there is this sense of me. I'm going to fix everything. I'm going to come up with the ideas. I'm going to build this model. But with time as a leader, it's really a lot less about you than you think. It's really about the people who enable you and who are doing the work. You're there to just enable them. I think good managers recognize that and accept that role.
Oh, yes, definitely. How do you keep your knowledge fresh, Seham? After the MBA, you finished. I know you did a lot of consultancy in New York. You came back to Kuwait, a couple of other jobs. How do you refresh your knowledge?
I think you got to read everything and anything a lot of the time. I think that's kind of the reality. I think of even during my MBA, before my MBA, you're always learning by reading. I think it's whether you're reading, just everybody has 50, 100 books that they want to get through and are on their reading list. But there is so much knowledge out there by so many incredible people who are writing all the time, whether it's recently I was reading The Culture Map, a book about how people from different cultures and different parts of the world work in different ways and think of in different ways, or, the outlier. There's just so much information out there. For me personally, from a professional perspective, it's part of my job, to read and be educated. Kind of like how I use an analogy of doctors. A doctor graduates from med school. If they're not reading and publishing and reading the latest research, they're very quickly kind of out of the loop and they're no longer like they're not doing their profession justice. And I think it's the same in business. Like it's not an option, right? Like, I think it's like a mandatory thing you have to do. So it's a kind of a simple answer, but I'm always curating the list of things that I need to be reading and educating myself on.
And I see that more and more coming, right, Seham? Not only in business and in medicine, maybe in all disciplines, to everyone, to every adult now, right? In so many ways, we're talking about fast-changing words. So imagine if not, you know.
I think we don't have an excuse because information is so prevalent and available. I mean, even if I don't have time to read, a book on whatever topic it might be, organizational structures or people management or, financial modeling, I don't have an excuse. I can go on Chat GPT, I can go on BART, and I can say, hey, give me a summary. You can always access information so easily and learn. And whether it's a book or an AI tool or even things like Coursera and online courses, like I think it's happening more, to your point, because the information is there. And so if you're not, it's an opportunity cost, it's a missed opportunity if you're not tapping into it.
Definitely. You use the word information and you use the word knowledge. What does knowledge mean to you and what does information mean to you?
I think information is data, as facts, as things that you see and you can absorb. I think knowledge is things that are ingrained over time. And knowledge about a specific topic, it has an element of experience that you can apply and use in different ways. And information is more that. I think that's how I would define it.
I think that's very true in many ways, yes, definitely. Because knowledge is very unique to you, right? So it's all about how you applied the information that you took, how you digested it, how it became part of you.
Yes. Or in a way, I guess maybe the analogy is, you read a lot of books, there's a lot of information. I think how you aggregate that information and then use it yourself and build, hey, I read this in this book, I read that in that book, this theory, and you kind of build it into your own understanding and apply it. I think then it becomes kind of the knowledge that you inherit versus the information that you read.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the challenges, Seham. We talked about the invasion, COVID, these disruptions that happens, and hopefully they won't happen as often as we think they will. But what other challenges are you facing today as a leader, especially as a younger leader? Maybe I want to hear more about that.
It depends, really. There are challenges that are universal that I face, that probably any leader anywhere in the world will face. And then there's challenges of working in the Middle East and working in a part of the world where maybe we're not as business friendly. There's kind of limitations. So I don't know, maybe I talk a bit about book. I think more globally, I think some of the challenges that have come up with COVID and maybe generational changes is how we deal with ways of working, how we deal with the office versus remote work, how we deal with the importance of mental health and employee kind of well-being and how that comes into the workplace is one thing that I think it's a challenge because it's evolving and I don't think anybody has the right answers. And I think there's a bit of a generational kind of thinking gap between maybe your Gen Z or millennials and how we work together and how we find common ground in the ways we work is a challenge. That's something I think I face. I've talked to a lot of kind of people leading businesses all around the world. They're like, oh my God, how do we reconcile the way we think and work with the Gen Z? We think about in office and you got to be there and you got to show up at 8:00 and you got to be there before your boss and have FaceTime. I think then you see a newer generation where that stuff doesn't matter as much to them. They want to work from home. They care more about kind of their comfort and reconciling that ways of thinking and working and kind of, I think is a challenge that we need to come to grips with if we're going to maximize kind of the talent of our teams and how we use teams. So I think that's a big challenge. Another challenge is just how do you win the market? We've come into an age where there's a lot of saturation. There's everything you can want, right? Like it's very competitive. There's so many companies. Everybody's trying to differentiate. If I think of the tech world, the food delivery world, right? Like you're no longer a first mover, kind of everything's been out there. And so the challenge of winning and building a business and being successful, I think in such competitive times when more and more companies have the ability to build and play in the market, I think it makes it more fun because you got to strategize even more. How do where are you going to find the wins? How are you going to win share? But it's challenging because there's just more players out there and more people trying to do what you're trying to do. And the resource availability and the technology has enabled that. I think those are two things that I think are challenges. I think the other challenge is maybe more personal is how do you balance kind of that ambition and wanting to grow and wanting personally to be successful with your mental health, your stress, your daily habits, so that you can have a balanced life, is something I think myself, a lot of people that I knew during my MBA, during my consulting days, that we struggle with this. What is the balance between having that hunger and wanting to work every day for 12, 15 hours? And maybe that connects back to kind of the younger generation. Maybe we need to learn something from them.
I feel you're the younger generation, Seham. For me, you are the younger generation.
I think the gap
ways.
between my generation and Gen Z is a bigger gap between my generation and Gen X.
Why do you think so?
I think it has probably something to do with technology and how technology has become, it came up during our time. But when I was young, I wasn't as ingrained in the impacts of technology, social media, kind of the openness of sharing, that kind of culture and attitude of, hey, we share, we're open, we share our feelings, we're kind of individualistic. That was starting to come into play. But I think with Gen Z, it's even more ingrained. It's like they have access to information, they have access to opinions. It's amazing. They're opinionated and they know what they want, and they're not afraid to share their feelings. And there's less of a hierarchical kind of expectation in the workplace, anywhere really, And I think that maybe has to do with technology and information and availability of information that kind of started at my age, but then really, by the time I was a little bit older, it took off. And I think the younger generation just kind of, they live and breathe that more.
I mean, many of the challenges you talked about, I'd like to go and dig deeper a little bit with when you talked about the generations and the workplace now. I see the workplace coming with 3 to 4 generations working together because of longevity issues, right? So what are some of the answers you've found so far in bridging the gap between the generations?
I don't know if I found a perfect answer. That's still something I struggle with. But I think I believe in kind of communicating and being honest, right? If, for example, something like, what is our policy about working from home or working in the office? Something I debate with my team. I say, guys, I have an expectation. I want you to be in the office. I think we work better, that it helps us overcome and problem solve. But, younger people in my team might find it no, it's restricting to our flexibility. I think communicating and not just demanding. I'm a manager. I can come and say, just show up. I don't care. I think communicating and saying, look, this is why I think this is important. This is why I think us being in the office is important. Let me give you an example of how we can problem solve. Let me use a case of something we did when we were in the office. And over communicating and explaining your perspective from whatever generation you come from, I think is the only way you could bridge those gaps. And then listening as well and saying, okay, that's my point of view. What is your perspective? What is your kind of way of working, or what do you think makes sense? And then trying to come to consensus, and sometimes having to disagree and still commit to what you want to do. But I'm someone who believes in telling people that I manage and that work for me what I think, why I think it, and almost over communicating and explaining versus, I'm this generation, this is how I think about working. You guys gotta come over on this side and accept the way I do things. So I'm a big believer in communicating with teams and explaining exactly what I'm thinking and feeling.
It makes a lot of sense. But definitely I can see, Seham, maybe that also your leadership style is changing somehow, right?
Definitely. I think as I've grown as a manager, for sure, it's changed. I think, when I first started I remember my first project as a consultant, managing an analyst. I was too much of a friend. I think when you first become a manager, you're so used to being managed that you want to be the person's friend, and you want to be so nice, and you want to be understanding. And I think that's important, and you want to do that as a manager. But I think with time, I've become a bit more, okay, it's a balance. I want to be your friend. I want to be someone you trust. We want to be cool, but I also have a job to do, and I need to push you, and I need to hold you accountable, and I need to be tough sometimes, and I need to play that balance. So I think with time, I've kind of had to step away from being overly accommodating and had to, be tougher, whether it's somebody, maybe when I was younger, if somebody was on my team that I thought, maybe wasn't the right fit or wasn't really the right person, or maybe had performance issues, I was much more likely to say, no, okay, we'll work it out. I'll help you. I'll take on more of your work. I think now, once you kind of go through these things and you start to develop kind of an understanding of the business need and your job as a manager to put the business first, you start to make those decisions quicker and say, look, you're not right for the role, for example, and we need to come to an understanding. You're more willing to make those decisions because you know that that's what's needed for the business. and
Right.
you're less kind of worried about being liked by your team or being friendly with your team. And so I think that happens probably to a lot of managers. It's kind of a natural progression.
I have a problem with the word manager now. I don't know, because I feel even in the word knowledge management, I felt that the word managing something is more about functionality, control, authority. And when we talked about, how you lead your teams and how that balance and finding that communication channel that is open, you taking feedback and kind of reaching a middle point. Do we need to use manager really when it's what you're doing is more like a leadership position?
There's difference. I think you can, sometimes you need to be a leader and sometimes you need to be a manager. I agree. I think ideally when you're leading a company, you want to be seen, hey, this is the leader. And that's the kind of, you want to be inspirational. You want to share the vision. You want people to follow, essentially a leader. You want people to follow you and believe in what you're preaching. But I do think there are times when, as a leader and as a manager, you need to be a manager, which means you need to step in and manage a process or manage the work someone's doing because, it's not enough. I mean, I think it's more fun to always kind of be in that inspirational figure, but sometimes the reality of the job is you need to manage so many things. But I think the word management sometimes does apply. To manage a situation, you need to manage a person, as in you need to give them more of your time and guide them and be very deliberate versus just kind of leading them and being back of it. I think, good managers, good leaders know when to balance the two, when they need to be leaders, when they really need to step down and manage. And on the better days, you're leaning more toward leadership.
Yeah, but I feel it's time to come up with a new terminology. Don't you think so? I just feel we're stuck sometimes in words and linguistics that we have used for so long. Sometimes they don't function anymore. We need to come up with a word that means more of what's happening now.
Well, what kind of word?
Maybe I'm thinking so much about that because of, I changed kind of the word management in knowledge management and I put knowledge mindfulness because I felt that we need to attend more to our knowledge, nudge, create a nurturing environment for that to flourish and elevate. You know what I'm saying? So rethinking so many of the models, I feel we're in times of transitions now. And this is the time to rethink, to reimagine, because sometimes our older learnings, our older terminology, it worked for a while, but then you're stuck, okay, I can't think that old way. As you said, we're not there yet. We don't have a playbook that tells us exactly what is this and that. So being creative, imaginative about, what could work for us better now, maybe.
Yeah. I think potentially, I think you're right. But again, I think it's a balance. I think you mentioned mindfulness. I think there's in a job environment, in a business, in a corporate, there's a time there's a balance between the time when, yes, you need to nurture and you need to build a creative environment. And there's times when you just need to it is kind of, there is still a place for the older thinking of things need to get done. You need to manage things. Yes. It needs to be a certain discipline. And so I think I potentially agree, but maybe it's more adding to the vocabulary than necessarily replacing it. Leader is kind of a good word. You're a coach, you're coaching people, you're guiding people. There's so much of your job that has to be that. But then there are times when, it's kind of just back to the old way of there's just things getting done. And that's the reality of business. And if you balance the two, I think it's very fruitful.
It's a very integrative approach to things when to use this and that and when to be wise about using this and that. Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I think, Seham, we should stop here for now. But coming up in the second part of my conversation with Seham AlHusaini, we're going to discuss the importance of self-awareness.
I think being aware and being very, accepting that you don't know everything and you're always growing and learning is such an important thing, and probably a fundamental principle that allows you to always evolve and improve. Otherwise, you get a bit stuck.
You have been listening to the Knowledge Mindfulness Porch with Laila Marouf. If you want to join the movement of knowledge mindfulness and shape the world of tomorrow, go to drlailamarouf.com. The Knowledge Mindfulness Porch is a production of Forbes Books.